3 scenarios we could potentially get for the part 3 of the 7th anniversary. Would you prefer 2 ultra units, 1 ultra unit but it's an ultra legendary finish, or 1 ultra unit and it's an ultra game originals? Just a side note, the UK is so hot, it's being hit with Trunks' heat dome attack. This is outrageous, but we still pushing content. These 3 scenarios are not unique scenarios that anyone has thought of, but they are just possible, and they all come with their pros and cons, and I wanted to run through what the outcome would be depending on the scenario we got. Now what I will say is, depending on what scenario we get, it does allow for certain units to appear where normally they might have not had a chance. But in the comment section below, when we get to the end of the video, let me know which one is to your favor. Let's get into this. Let's first address the most popular outcome that is possible for this 3rd part of the 7th anniversary. The 2 ultra outcome. This one is very popular because we've gone a long while without having an ultra. Currently in 2025, we've only got 1 ultra, that ultra being Ultra Perfect Cell. But in 2024, by this time we already had 2 ultras, those being Ultra Super Saiyan 2 Gohan and Ultra Golden Frieza. So the fact that we are in July with only 1 ultra is crazy. To add more details to how crazy this is, the last time we got an ultra, that being Cell, it was 8 Legends Limiteds ago, which is a major gap. So clearly they've slowed down, and this might definitely be intentional, or maybe they just wanted to drop more LLs. Who knows? But one thing I'll say for certain, a big factor for this would be that they're trying to slow down the progression of units kits in the game to avoid homogenization. They put it out in the newsletter before with the battle updates. They basically want units, teams and kits to be more unique. For example, back in the day, regeneration actually regen the most, but now any team just be regenning as much health, which is ridiculous. Anyways, if we was to get 2 ultras, what it would allow for is more variety in the meta. When we typically get an ultra, we're expecting the ultra to be the highest caliber, so it needs to meet a certain standard of hype, and that would mean we're counting out a lot of powerful opponents just because most people would favor the heroes. It would be a Goku, very rarely a Vegeta because he doesn't have any big class moments, at least for a celebration anyways. Gohan, Fusion Warriors, you get the gist. But now they compare 2 characters to equal the hype that we usually would have got if it was just 1 character. For example, we always get Gogeta. In or outside of a celebration, Gogeta is very popular, but if they dropped the Ultra Broly by himself, he wouldn't pull in the audience as much as he's nowhere near as hype. That should go without saying. But if they dropped him alongside Gogeta, he also gets to be consumed as much because he is paired with a hype character, and that should also go without saying. And if you think of it like that, they get pulled up because there's another hype character who's also dropped at the same time. We get a lot more combinations that would end this celebration in an amazing manner. For example, Ultra Super Saiyan Goku, we might get a new one, and people might say this is not hype. Not generally, I'm talking in-game. In-game, it doesn't always translate the best, especially with the last Legends Limited Super Saiyan Goku. Let's be real here. Obviously, some people were hyped, but this is a big moment, and for an Ultra, it would definitely sell. But then looking towards Frieza, even though he's the most popular antagonist, he doesn't really hold a hair to Super Saiyan Goku. But if you put them together for 1 celebration, that will bang. But then there's some negatives. For example, if there's 2 Ultra banners and we have the exact same rates on those banners, then on top of that we'll probably have trash Legends Limiteds on both banners. The only value you get out of this part 3 is 1 character. In part 1 and part 2, even if you don't get the Legends Limited, the Legends Limited on LL banners just are typically better. On top of the fact there's also a sparking that's new that would be to most people's liking. We see Kale and Caulifla, they are very good and they sport 2 elements. We see Kaba, he's also super good, a very valuable support unit. Even in part 2, we got Tien and Chaozu. I'm not going to speak too much on Nappa, but the mechanic is definitely cool. But on an Ultra banner, we won't get anything like that, and the rates are much lower. So if you don't get the new Ultra, you leave feeling disappointed. And now in this case, if you're free to play especially, you have to choose which one you want, because the likeliness of you getting both new Ultras is super low, as getting 1 Ultra is already hard enough. But what I will say is, as a free to play, it's your responsibility to save up for what you like. Nobody's forcing you to summon on every single banner, and you don't need to chase both Broly and Gogeta. But I do also understand the argument that if they drop both together, and I was using those guys as an example, and you really like both, it puts you in a bind because you're not in the position, because you're free to play, to easily access both characters with the amount of Chrono Crystals you can hold in your account, with the 20k CC cap and just the Chrono Crystals they give out anyways, plus the amount of units they're dropping. But that's also overall assuming assuming you summon on everything. But the 20k CC cap definitely hinders free-to-play players. So the con would be not everybody would be able to access both ultras because it's overwhelming to summon on the ultra banner. But the pro would be there's more variety and you can chase different characters versus the usual that we get, which would be a fusion warrior or something like that. So that's everything regarding if we got 2 ultras. Let's move on to the next scenario. We're now going to address the Ultra LF scenario. This has been something people have been begging for almost 2 years and it hasn't dropped. There's not much evidence to back this, but what you can say is because of how they've adjusted the filter in game, they've moved the Legends Limited over to the rarity category. So that means you could have an Ultra who's also a Legends Limited, the same way we have a Sparking who's also a Legends Limited. And that also unironically goes for EXs and Heroes. So legendary finishes are now open to be attached to Ultras. But will we be getting it? That's up for the devs to decide. But let's assume we do get this year. I think objectively this is the easiest way to increase the hype levels. You get a unit that has the ink art, they are a higher caliber tier unit, very likely will have a new mechanic, and you also get the legendary finish on top. How greedy! Oh my god, you're getting everything in one unit. But there's also a lot to consider with this. If we're going to increase the rarity, the character that they decide to drop, the options regarding that definitely decreases. I feel it's impossible we'll get a character like Ultra Broly, Ultra Frieza, even a Vegeta unit. It just wouldn't happen if they're gonna max out a new rarity, or to be more specific, give Ultras legendary finishes. They'd have to go for something big and guaranteed, and there's only a few guys that I think can meet the requirements for that, and those would be a variation of Goku, a variation of Vegito, a variation of Gogeta, and even then, for the end of a celebration, I wouldn't even put Gohan in that category. If it was to be a Goku, I'd honestly only think it would be Ultra Instinct Goku or Super Saiyan Goku. But any version of Gogeta or Vegito can really fly. In most cases, it would be Vegito. As you guys know, they've gone 6 for 6. They've dropped a Vegito every single year. But outside of the character options, it's just very obvious that this would increase the bar in satisfaction for what you get out of a unit. You get the Ultra value, you get the Legends Limited value, you get the aesthetic value times 10. You know, you can't really lose with this unit. It's a very easy way to make us feel like the celebration's a bit more special since they've already brought out so much new, specifically talking about the dynamic battles. But I don't really think there's much more to talk about. But something I do want to slide in before I end this conversation, there are potential cons, and I call them potential cons because we haven't seen them yet. So if they do drop an ultra legendary finish, imagine the cost for summoning is more. You have to spend 1,200 every multi. I think people would then be like, I don't really want to do that. Or if the rates lower even more below an ultra rate, I'm sure people would then hate the idea even though the unit would look good. But those are potential, so don't hold them as a guarantee, but it's very possible if they're going to drop something that's even more valuable than already existing ultras. The last scenario we got is a Game Originals Ultra. Now I think the main selling point for this would be that we haven't got a Game Originals in a long while. Also in addition, they recently buffed Shallot, so it's building up a lot of hype, especially with the way the story is going. I'm not too tapped in, but I know it's getting real saucy right now. But in general, the idea of a Game Originals increases the potential of a character. It would be so unpredictable in most cases that what they decide to release will undoubtedly blow our minds. The combination of units, if they decide to go the tag unit route or they decide to do a new transformation, something we haven't seen, a brand new character, for example, Goku and Gohan, what if they fused in the Buu Saga? The potential is truly limitless because they can just make something from scratch. They can put units together from scratch. It's literally like a Lego. They're just building whatever they like. And I think this is what makes this idea very valuable to the audience. Now, would they do this? I don't know. Especially since they could just drop a free-to-play Shallot, the fusion between Shallot and Giblet, and call it a day instead of dropping a Game Originals premium unit. But if it was premium, it'd be more to the audience's liking simply because it would be based on something the wider audience of Dragon Ball just knows. The reason I say this is because a lot of Sparking Zero players do not know who Shallot is, and recently they got the Shallot DLC. So imagine logging into Sparking Zero, you're like, who the hell is this guy? And then they're trying to market that as their biggest selling point for the part 3 of the anniversary, their grand finale. That's the main reason I think they wouldn't do that. But I don't think there's anything much different with this Ultra. It's just the character choice would be the selling point, and because we haven't got a Game Originals in a long time, plus the story mode picking up, for every Dragon Ball Legends player, this is a big drop. drop. But generally speaking, this could also be a miss too. If they decide to do a mix-up that just doesn't pique the audience's interest, it becomes a fumble very quickly. But I guess no matter what category we're talking about, it all depends on the Dragon Ball Legends developers' execution. Now, to end out the video, I'm gonna give my personal opinion. Me personally, I am against the idea of 2 ultras, because if they drop 2 ultras, I will undoubtedly skip one unless I get luck beyond the heavens, and that just doesn't happen frequently. My luck this year hasn't been the greatest either, and especially because I'm doing this free-to-play thing, it's just less appealing to me. From a viewing standpoint, having 2 ultras just means more content, and we can just look at it and be like, wow, they look good. But then trying to summon and actually playing, that's super depressing. So I'd prefer if they just dropped 1 ultra but made that ultra super great, or if anything, they drop 2 ultras but the second ultra is free to play. For example, like I mentioned earlier, the Fusion Chalet from the story mode. But if I had to summon on 2, nah. So I'm also leaning towards the Ultra LF option or the Ultra Game Originals option, because if it's just a regular Ultra on its own, boy, they did not increase the bar this year. Shout out the PvP update though. But if I had to pick one for sure, I think I would just go for the Game Originals. I want to be surprised, something I can't predict in the slightest. I think that would truly exceed my expectations for what the 7th anniversary was and could be. An Ultra LF is nice, but in some cases, especially when you're playing, some Legends Limiteds aren't too far off from ultras themselves. So I think if the character had a bit more flair and randomness, I would appreciate that a lot more. But yeah, man, that's going to make the end of the video. Let me know in the comment section which you'd prefer out of these 3 scenarios. I told you which one I'm going, but you're allowed to have your own opinion as always. So hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. If you haven't already, make sure to press the subscribe button. We're on this grind to 200,000 subscribers. I appreciate you guys for watching, man. My name's Zakashi, guys, and I'll see you guys in the next one, man.